Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of Mind Your Mouth. I am your host, Melissa Mugno, and I am so excited to be coming with you and having another honest, raw conversation with another great guest. So, for my Mind Your Mouth crew, let's introduce and bring on my dear friend, Peter Beckwith. How are you doing, Peter? Welcome to Mind Your Mouth.
Thanks, Melissa. It's good to see you. I'm good. A little nervous because I know this one's going to get, I'm going to have to walk my talk, right? You have to expose yourself and be authentic.
Well,
it's a lot easier to tell other people to do that than to do it myself, but I'm excited. Thanks for asking.
That is the main reason I wanted to have you on. Was I really set out to do this show was actually, I'll start off by giving you a little bit. I just had somebody ask me a question, was from a friend of ours, and he said, "What's the point of the show? What are you doing?" And I said, you know what? I just want to be able to have conversations with people that maybe a lot of people have seen on other podcasts, but in a different capacity, that Joe Rogan style of just, I don't know, what's new, what's up, what's going on in the industry, but also just get to know people from a more authentic and vulnerable side, because we were going to kind of go here a little bit later in the show, but behind every brand is a human. And I really care about the human. And I think you and me, our journey, getting to know each other, and I'm going to let you share to the audience who you are and how our paths even crossed. But it all started with a human conversation, getting to know each other as people. And we just happened to also be in the same space that we did some similar work stuff. So for the audience, tell them a little bit, who are you professionally? Sure. Who are you? What do you do?
So we want to just kind of get to it, right? So I am one of the co-founders of Mad Rose Media. We're an Airway exclusive ad agency, and we'll talk more about that as we go along.
Yeah, which, I mean, that makes sense for some of my listeners. You know, Airway tends to be our drug of choice.
Yeah. And the human behind that, I grew up in a upper middle class town outside of Boston. Okay. Great family, very ambitious parents. I went to Cornell University in 1984, graduated in 1988, and was kind of high class homeless behind drugs and alcohol around 2006. So
okay,
that's the journey. It's always interesting when, I share that to one degree or another with all of my clients, because if you think about it, the people that I work with and the people I help are, very, very, very super achieving doctors. Very few of them have lived that kind of a life. And my challenge to them, and I think it was to you when we first met too, is like, all right, well, what's really going on with you? What are your blocks? And in order for me to help them get past that, because what we talk about in marketing is there's two issues here. There's number one is you, right? And I could just use you, Melissa. What does your thought leadership represent? And then how do we clarify a brand behind that so you can attract the kind of people that you can help? And in order to do that, the mask has got to come off and we've got to be authentic. That doesn't mean you have to bear your uglies like I do, but I try to be an example for my clients of, look, like we all have stuff. And so here's some of mine. And off camera, my diploma, my Cornell diploma is up there and it's ripped and it's got stains on it. And part of that is because it was one of the few possessions I had left when I was living out of a cargo van, and it's got coffee and vodka stains on it. So when people say, "Oh, you went to Cornell," I'm like, yeah, but there's a little bit more to the story than that, where, yes, I did. I accomplished it at a very high level. And then I ran into the block of what the world tells us is success. So I started the first half of my career. I was I wrote and produced television and had some success in that on the material side, collected some houses and some money. And I married a beautiful woman and I had a wonderful child, and that got emptier and emptier and emptier. And I medicated that started with prescription drugs and then poured alcohol on top of that. And the next thing I knew, that got out of control, lost everything, and was on couches, sober livings, hotel rooms, and in the back of vans for a few months before I got my life together. So that experience, and before I pivoted and turned my life around, that's the sort of, the buzzword is vulnerability, from which I come with my clients. But it really just is about how do we connect as human beings? Because if we really want to do good things for our patients, we've got to see the human first. And yeah, there's a lot of marketing that needs to be done. We need to get messages out, and there needs to be clarity, and there needs to be, brand awareness and all those things. audiences need to be identified. We talked about that before you turn your camera on. But at the very, very bottom of it, if you want to connect with people, you got to be willing to be a person. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's
it answered my question perfectly. I mean, I think if we look back, we've known each other a while. I mean, it's been almost over 10 years. I took that Bill Hang course in 2015, I think it was. And, here I was, I've never been able to be fit in a box. That's always been the problem, right? Everyone's always wanted to put me in a box and they wanted me to define myself. Well, are you a myofunctional therapist? Or, are you a consultant? All these things. And I didn't have the answer for anybody because in a lot of ways I was all those things, right? I was all of them. I wasn't one of them. But the one thing was, I remember a moment, I think it was at Dr. Hang's office, and we'll go into a little bit of your story with the Hangs, but I remember I think we're in his back office and you just were like, hey, we sat down and we talked and you were genuinely curious. It's like you could see through me in a way, you could just see that. I guess in a way I want to say I had potential. I always had great potential, great ideas, but I was just masked with just layers of insecurity and fear. And the number one fear of not being accepted and not somebody seeing that little shining star inside of me. But now I can sit and say it was because I needed to find it in myself first. And I was looking at all these other people and you sat down and we were sitting in that room and you started to tell me your story a little bit. And you were just telling me, and I remember it was such a needed moment. I can remember it clearly. I can remember the words. I can even remember the sun coming through the window. It's a memorable moment on my journey. And I don't know if I've ever had a real opportunity to thank you, because at the time I don't even know if I knew to say it because I didn't know how much I needed it. And I'm pretty confident I'm not the only one that you've had those moments with. And and I think when you and a text message came through and I was I believe very much in divine timing and everything happens exactly when it's meant to be. And I was oh my, duh. And perfectly, everything works out the way it was. I was I need you on the podcast. And we'll talk a little bit later. And then something just happened in the media today that is very terrible, but also I want to say interesting timing, because here we are talking today. And again, I just feel there are no coincidences. Everything happens exactly when it's meant to happen. And that was me surrendering my power. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about that surrender, the moment maybe you started to surrender or started to realize the way you were doing. Because I think would you agree? I have found any time that I have used my prescription pills or alcohol or whatever, it's usually when I think I'm in the driver's seat, when I'm trying to control the vessel.
Yeah, you said moment of surrender. That moment of surrender has been about 14 years long. I have a business coach and I was on with him this morning and we were talking about surrender, because I think I have a good friend in recovery who's going through a divorce right now. He talks about the full frontal surrender. My will, what I believe is supposed to happen, my definition of success, the things I strive for, versus what's real. And what you talked about, that text message and the impact that conversation had on you, what's changed for me since I surrendered to a clean and sober life is that slowly over time, my definition of success has changed. And now my definition of success is that the impact that you talked about on you or whoever it may be, and to share openly my experience and help people get to a better place in their life, whether that be personally, on a spiritual basis, recovering from drugs and alcohol, or on the business side. And that's a slippery slope, because that doesn't relieve us from the responsibility of making sure that we're protecting our margin physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. So I can't just levitate because I'm sober and I love to help people. I've got to keep my feet on the ground. And that's the challenge for me.
That's a big
deal. If it were up to me, I'm a guy, I chase high. I mean, that's I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. That has not gone away. And I find that I can substitute that. And when you talk about that, I was like, man, I'd love to just spend all day having those conversations. Well, the problem is I've got 50 active clients at any given time, a dozen employees, a family to support. And you spoke to it. There's the issue of balance, and how do we balance all of that? And that moment of clarity where I start to understand when I get uncomfortable, I want to reach for something quick and easy to fix that discomfort, when the real exercise is to what can I learn from this discomfort? What discipline can I find to get to a better place that is sustainable? And I find that to be true in personal development and in business development. Most of my clients, and you were in this space back 10 years ago, it was, I'm just running a million miles an hour.
Yeah.
Because I don't truly believe that if I move in the direction of what my heart tells me is right, I'm not going to be okay. That ultimately is the concern. I'm just not going to be okay. And I suffer from that too. It's why I spend so much time helping other people with it. If that which we teach is what we need to learn the most about. So that's two for two. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. No, you did not. This is and again, there's no question. This is a conversation. For a very long time, I remember someone, my mother used to tell me, like, I talk, everyone told me I talk too much. And now I really did. I realized, talking is my gift, and conversations. I didn't realize that many people actually just want to hear the conversations I was having with people off camera. And I was like, well, then we might as well put them on camera, because I think a lot of people live on the surface. And for a long time, I judged it. I didn't mean to, but I did. And I always was scratching to go deeper. I always have been a curious gal that wanted to know why, how, when, and I always would ask. I probably always asked questions. People were like, who does she think she is? Or, wow, that was a little intense. And I think maybe some people found that you either liked it or you didn't. So it was either a good taste or a bad taste. But lucky for me, timing is everything. And right now it's really cool to be authentic. So I'm really finding my stride.
It's funny because in the recovery movement, we talk about replacing the drug.
Yeah.
You can replace the drug with, you name it, the vices, eating, relationships, sex, or all that kind of stuff. And then there's the positive replacements. And for me, the drug that I've kind of really, hopefully had a healthy addiction to is watching the transformation like the one that you've had, on a personal level, and what my career is seeing that on a professional level, where my clients come to me and they're stuck in a rut of doing, I'm just kind of generalizing to make a point, traditional kind of drill and fill dentistry, and then they find the courage to walk in the direction of becoming whole healthcare providers, and it just opens up a whole new world for them. And that is truly, that's what sustains me. I struggle in the brand new industry of Airway just like everybody else does. It's volatile. There's ups and downs. It's uncertain. We think it's going in one direction. It goes in another. It redefines itself over and over again. We have people coming in and out of the industry, and that I'm just as affected by all of that uncertainty as anybody else is. But the thing that anchors me is when I see a practitioner or a peer like you find their stride. And that is, that's a permanent healthy high that reminds me of that little, 5-minute zip I used to get back when I was drinking and using drugs, because I am wired to want that. And I believe that most human beings are. I think we all want to see something like that gives us that feeling of, there is purpose here. There's a reason for doing this. There's something more important than, the next whatever goal you may have.
Well, because
money in the bank or what have you.
Well, that was an interesting, for me, money was always my God. That was my ultimate high. I was just,
not me, Melissa. I've never fallen into that trap.
Yeah. Well, and and I realized from some of the work I've done with my coaches, and, I'm very open on the show that it's not for everyone. I'm a visual learner. So for me, going down and working in South America with the indigenous and choosing to do ayahuasca, and I go down once or twice a year, it allowed me to tap into some deeper resources that I needed. And I realized that ancestrally, my grandfather, who I love and loved me and more than anything, and I'm so grateful to him, he really thought that money was going to solve our family's problems. That's what he thought. World War II, we all have a relative like this. And he only wanted the best, and he wanted it for my mother, and he wanted it for me. And he saw something in me that maybe he didn't see in his other 3 kids, or maybe he wasn't mature enough in his parenting stride, that he then thought, well, he couldn't get them to do it, so he put it on me. And there was this moment, I'm sitting at this fire, Peter, right? And I'm in my process, and I'm crying because my back hurts so much. And this shaman comes over and he says, I want you to go in and ask, where is this coming from? And I said, I have a backpack on and I have these weights in my backpack. And he's like, let's get through the backpack, and I'm like pulling them out. And he's like, what is this? And I said, I own this company. I'm going to take it public. And he said, cool. All right. Like, where are you going to take, what does it mean to take it public? I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to go public. He goes, well, what are you going to do with it? And I said, I'm going to make money. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, are you happy? I said, I go, I don't even think this is my dream. And he goes, all right, now you're getting somewhere. And I just, realized in that moment, yes, I hunger for success. My grandfather did see something, and success in many different ways, as you just said. But I was carrying his legacy to fix my mother, my children, like whatever, because I loved him so much. So I thought it was my job to take on his legacy. And I had this moment in the shift that I like gave him back his rocks. And I was like, I'm going to go do some really great things. I am. It's going to be a little different than maybe what you wanted or what you thought it was, because our shift, and it, symbolic moment. But I'll tell you, I haven't had back pain like that in a while since then. And I feel like a lot of people have that and maybe don't have the ability to communicate it.
I completely agree. I know my dad's a school teacher. He's down in Florida and he's in the kind of mid stages of Alzheimer's. And we've been able to talk quite a bit in the last few years. My dad was a school teacher and a principal. He was in that, and he comes from that World War II generation. He's 86 now, where you save. That's what you do. You put a little bit of money in the bank every week, every month, make a little bit now so that later on you could be okay. And I'm an entrepreneur, as are you. And that's a great plan until you got a month that's a little soft and you got to make payroll. But, it's just things change. So It's been interesting because I've carried. We can talk about ayahuasca later. I'm terrified of it. I know people in the recovery movement have done it and benefited from it tremendously. I don't know that I can cross that.
It's not for everybody, and I'm very open on here. It's not. Do I think? Let me just make this statement. Do I think everyone could benefit? Absolutely, but it really is a very big energy balance shifter. And some people do not need that type of energy shift in their force field because it will not serve them at the time. And what I've learned from these, because one thing I do, and I just want to be clear, I'm not a big fan of drinking the medicine with some random Caucasian dude in LA. I don't mean that in a mean. Like I put the work in. I go to where it comes from. I drink with people that have been like 100-year-old man that's been drinking since he's 4, because it's very sacred in that community. It's that's their medicine. I don't try to dabble with people. I don't know what I don't know. And they're the first ones to tell you, if you're not called to get on a plane and then get on a boat and go like do that, then it's not your time or it's not for you. So I'm really I try to be very responsible when I speak about it. It's very powerful. It's got a sense.
I've seen it help a ton of people. I haven't been able to cross that bridge yet. I do a lot of inner work and meditation, and a lot of it has been around a similar topic where, carrying my father's beliefs. And, he even now he's outside of Jacksonville, Florida. There's a condo and a car there a mile off the beach. So when I go visit him, that, he planned for that 25 years ago. He's just that guy. And, I'm a bit of a cowboy. I started a Airway only ad agency at 51 when, I didn't have a heck of a lot of money at all. And he was just like, what? Proud of me. He never had that. He would classify himself as never having that kind of courage, but still breaking through those chains is a big part of what I do now in my own business coaching experience, where my guy is constantly pressing. It's like, well, what really is the benefit of worrying like your father did?
I appreciate this conversation because, I have family members from my husband's side of the family that literally told me why can't I keep a job? Right? Like, what's wrong with me? I should just go work for the man. I should just work. I was working for something. Why can't I just work And there was this internal entrepreneurial spirit I couldn't shake. Like I couldn't get rid of it. Like I didn't think what they were doing made sense. Do you know, that sounded torturous to me. I didn't know how to explain it. I wasn't trying to judge them, but they had no problem judging me because what they were doing was acceptable.
My sister, I always thought that about my sister. Like my sister's the sweetest person in the world. She would never come right out and say it. And she retired recently, and Kelly had gone through a divorce about 15 years ago, and then became an executive in the Vermont State College system, one of the C-level executives, completely rebuilt, like sort of did it similar to what my dad did. She's a couple years older than me and got to the point of where she could retire. And I remember when she called me and said, I'm ready to go. I said, I am so incredibly proud of you in what you've done. And I didn't do it in that conversation. And later I'm like, God, I feel so less than. And she's like, she feels the same way about me, and that we've taken different paths. And I think a lot of it, my experience has been that over time, when motives are good, and we talked about that at the beginning of the call, when our motives really are aligned, where we want good things for the people that we're in service to, the results, and again, it's not like you can't, good intentions don't pay bills. You got to be responsible. Mm-hmm. However, the results become less and less important as we're doing that footwork to make the world a little bit of a better place and give our fellow men that little piece of hope that they might need to take a step in the direction of their dreams so that they can make the world a better place. I've gotten past believing that, and I've gotten to experiencing it, where, today I knew we were coming on today, and I knew you were going to tell that story about us talking, and I got all the stuff that we have, but today's a good day because, there's an impact there where, that higher power that you talked about, that you got through medicine, that I get through the Joseph's Alcoholics Anonymous, working through me to influence another person. What more can you really ask for than that? And that to me really is where the definition of success comes. It's why I love my work so much, because my clients get to do that all day, every day with patients. People come in and their lives have turned around. That's a great feeling.
So, as it's interesting, I've been pondering on this question that for my own internal growth, my purpose, again, it keeps coming back. What is your mission statement? What's your plan? And, for me, it's this bridge, because my personal journey all roads have led me to exactly what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And this Airway movement, for me was this moment in time that the first time I ever sat at Barry Rayfield's office at a Myobrace conference in 2010. Again, I can almost tell it like the day somebody gets sober, right? Like I can tell you the moment I saw this video, it was like having these conversations. And there was this woman speaking about a child late to school all the time, and this child that was identified with maybe not following all the rules, or not, learning disabilities. And, being in the 80s, I feel very blessed. Now I look at it, like, I'm really grateful they didn't put me on Adderall as a child, because they didn't have it yet until later on. Because I look at my brother, who's 7 years younger than me, very different scenario. We have different issues that we deal with. He was put on Adderall very early. And I'm going to say something. I feel like Adderall for me, it was a drug. I mean, a very big drug. I know it helps some people, but it gave me this false illusion of things I could do, and I became very reliant on it. And, when I was growing up, I thought there was something wrong with me, right? Like I genuinely thought maybe I did like to give my mom a hard time. Maybe I didn't like school. Maybe I was a bit of a rebel, all those things, but I was exhausted in the mornings. I was also told all the time when I was little that I had my days and nights mixed up, that I liked to stay up. I was a night owl. I was always listening to the adults. I defined myself, my personality around these things, that when I sat in that room in 2010, I was like, could I have an airway issue? And it was a moment that for me was the first time that I went, maybe there's not something like mentally wrong with me. Maybe there's something also physically. I cried, like a tear came down my eye, because it was this moment of giving myself it's okay, Melissa. So when you Connor Deegan, like all these big things, right? Like these moments when things started getting captured in video. I don't know. Peter, when I think of you, I think about right before Mad Rose, maybe you guys were developing it and you walk us down here, but all I think about is everywhere you were when we were at meetings and Peter popped up, all of a sudden, a couple months later, there was a great visual video that went along and somehow took the experience we were having in real time and captured it on film. And I didn't know anyone else doing that. And that's when I think of you. I think that you took these feelings that were happening in rooms that no dentist, and I mean this loving all of our dentists, they're not always the best communicator. They're not the most coolest. I don't know how to say it nicely. I don't know. They don't always know how to capture or story tell, because that's what we do. I think what you and I can do well is story tell. And I just hadn't met anyone that did it like you. And then when I saw your team come together, for me, I think it changed a lot in the Airway game. Tell us a little bit about that.
We didn't know what else to do. You know, when I was working for Bill and Debbie pre-2010.
You know what? Let's tell the audience real quick. Anyone doesn't know Bill and Debbie Hang, why don't we tell a little bit about the Hang story?
Sure. I met my memory of the interaction, I was a ski bum after I graduated from Cornell. My parents wanted me to go get a corporate job. I had no interest in that. I went and became a ski bum in Vermont. And I started a video production company with a buddy of mine. And my memory is that we were in a second floor in a little strip mall where our office was. Bill Hang walks up the stairs, puts his hands out and says, "Hi, I'm Bill Hang. Did you get teeth pulled as part of your orthodontic treatment when you were a teenager?" I was like, "Yeah." You know, I remember him coming right out of the gate with that question. He probably did a little bit more pleasantries than that, but that's where it came out. And I was just starting my television producing career, and I had gotten, David, my partner, and I had gotten a deal to produce a movie that was going to be distributed worldwide by a company called Endemol through HBO. So I was headed to the HBO offices here in LA. I was like 29. It was a big deal. I was here in Los Angeles. My partner's father called me and said, "Did Bill Hang come to your office and ask you for video?" I said, "Yeah, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do it." He said, "No, you have to do it." We were in a small town. He said, "Bill's he grew up here. He didn't grow up there, but he built his practice here. He's kind of hometown boy, man. Good. He's going to LA. You got to do it." So I came back, and Bill and Debbie didn't know this for years. I came back and I was like, I got to do all this work, and I got a little baby at home. And anyways, we did these 2 videos that were some of the first facial morphing.
What year was this?
1996. It's
Wow.
30 years ago. So, and we did some facial morphing stuff that was, we were one of the first people to do that off of Madison Avenue. And Bill and Debbie had to buy us a bunch of Commodore computers that we had to string together, and we'd do 300 points and we'd wait overnight, these morphs. And then Bill and Debbie came to LA. They used those videos and they built the practice up. And when my oldest, Lillian, who is now 30, turned 10, I had moved to LA and we reconnected. And I brought Lily there, and Bill treated her. And Debbie said, we need to redo our website. And when we talked a little bit, I said, well, maybe we should do a bunch more of these patient testimonials, because these are pretty dramatic stories. And that's kind of where it all started. And I worked exclusively for them for the better part of 10 or 15 years. And back then, we didn't have the science in Airway. I mean, Bill was looking at lateral head x-rays before and after BioBlock orthotropics treatments, and we're seeing consistent improvements in the airway. And that was measurable. But, lateral head x-rays at that point, there were posture issues, and, how the image was taken. And it certainly was nowhere near as scientific as it is now. So I just kept, let's just get more people in front of that camera and just keep telling the story. And we did that for the better part of 10 years. It was hundreds of parents and patients from around the world, and then practitioners. And that's how that happened. It's, you talk about like destiny. I had taken a coactive life coaching course in between careers. I had a pause in my career. I was getting out of television and moving into marketing, and I needed something to do. And this coactive coaching process was very much about helping people understand what their values were, the perspectives from which they looked at things, and then what their process was. And it was by active listening and open-ended questions and allowing their client to lead and that type of thing. And as I did more and more interviews, I realized that my job as the interviewer was really just to create a safe space so that the truth could come out of the person on the other side of that lens. And that was a years-long journey where at first I'm trying to direct, I need to get this answer, I need to get that answer. And then over time, it was just, if I just allow this person to be who they are and let them know they're okay, it's going to come out. And that's what happened. And it's funny you say that, because now there's business success, right? And I think a lot about, maybe it's time to start thinking about heading back down in that direction and spending, a number of years doing storytelling in a little bit more of a sophisticated way. I think there's a documentary to be made. I think there are patient practitioner partnership stories to be told. I think we're at a point now where what I did back then maybe was a seed that now, planted a forest.
Planted a forest that would have been done.
That I think about coming back to.
Because, whether it's human development or professional development or finding your brand or your essence or whatever that may be, right? Because it's all about finding your bigger purpose. And we can touch on, storytelling. It's an ancient craftsmanship. This is nothing new, right? Like, it's an art. It's a skill. I mean, you go back into ancient times, that was how things stayed. I mean, storytelling is so crucial and so important and impactful to mankind, to humanity. I remember my wedding, all I wanted was this photographer, and he was really expensive, and I had a tight budget, and his name was Willie Wong, and he was a storyteller, and that was it. And his photos were magic because you didn't even need video, because the photos told the story. And I gave up a videographer for those photos because I said it didn't matter. And for a long time, I put those photos away and I pulled them out. And it was this beautiful moment. I don't share too much, but like, I went through a really tough time in my marriage. We almost lost our marriage. And I put that story away. And then all of a sudden I slowly started pulling them out. And as I'm sitting, I was like, I can imagine I'm in a process. I will eventually build the house that's meant to be. And I know those photos will be a very, very important story that will go on this wall. And it will actually have a bigger impact 15, 20 years after the event than it did. Because people are like, how come you didn't display them early on? Because it's going to impact later on. And, age, it's funny you say 51 when you started this thing. And, my 40s have been like the best time of my life. I'm excited for what the 50s will bring, because the storytelling that you can do, or I think I can now, is really impactful. And I just can't, I feel like people just don't know enough about that, and they need to put more into that. And when I think of your clients, and I just think about, when I think of Mad Rose, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but that's what I think. I don't think anyone's telling stories quite like you are.
It would be strong to say that I insist on it, but when we're qualifying, because I'm no different than you are. I've got the same 24 hours, and we're right now anyways a boutique shop, and we can't say yes to everybody. So that is something that I look for, because what my clients are, and I got 2 points here too about storytelling in general. And let me tell the first one. My clients are afraid to tell their story, and when I talked about maybe I'll go back to storytelling on video, my internal dialogue was saying, I won't be able to make a living doing that. I did it successfully for over a decade, and I still have that inner voice that says, no, that won't work. I'll end up, I won't be able to pay my bills. It'll be terrible. And I think that voice, all of us who are ambitious have that inner dialogue that constantly tells us that. And if you think about, what a private pay practice needs to be able to do, is they need to be able to set themselves apart from corporate medicine or the DSO down the street, which is, outspending them with, treatment-based,
tenfold,
Google, pay-per-click, crazy. So the question becomes, how are you going to set yourself apart? You need to charge more so that you can invest in your marketing message and your continuing education and in your team to provide the elevated experience that justifies the higher out-of-pocket costs that you bring to the table because of the medicine that you're practicing. And the only way I know on the branding side, not inside your office, but I would say that inside the office is a big part of brand too. We can talk about that later if you want, is you've got to let them know who the human being is and why they should come into partnership with you, just like I'm doing with you right now. So if you're a doctor, what is your reason for doing all this? And most of the time at this point in Airway, it's either because it affected them or a family member, And once that happened, they could not turn away.
Turn away.
And I think the
Once
reason
they drink that Kool-Aid. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the reason a lot of them have been attracted to me over the years is because that's me. That's the sobriety journey. Once I saw the sober way of life, I could not look away. And so I really can connect with them on that level and say, listen, there are steps that we can take to get you moving in the direction you want to go.
You know, it's such an important fact because, you know, one of the things a lot of people don't, again, going back to putting people into a box, and I think just because you are a branding person, you tell stories, you know, a lot of people don't know. They're like, what does Melissa do for consulting or whatever? The truth is, what I do really well is, one, what you and I do in common is being able to figure out. So if you're a leader, right, you're somebody, okay, you have a story, you connect to your daughter, me, my own story. That's great. You might be able to inspire yourself, but the question comes down to, can you inspire others? And then the question is do you have the ability to inspire your team to then create the operations and the scalable and the systems and all of the things that then allow it to become a well-oiled machine? And I had found on a very scale was that I would get into these situations and into these relationships as I was going through my own journey. And we can talk, you know, I thought I needed a dentist to partner with to become something. I didn't know what it was, even though there was this common pattern that really that dentist actually needed me more in the beginning than I needed them, because I had this spunk, this passion, this energy. I could sell, I could educate, I could deliver. And then I also had this clinical knowledge that I could tee up treatment plans and I could do all these things. And then I was on my journey and elevating an executive. And so what we did is we took that scalability from all of my failed partnerships, okay, and realized that honestly, I just needed exit strategy. I needed to be there for that first year or two, and then I needed to say, "See you later." Now you're the queen of your castle, because we needed to inspire teams, because you're only as good as the team that you have, and when I had met you, and if you're okay, can we go here just to get a little bit about your team? When I first met you, I knew you had some partners, but it wasn't until I feel like it was one of the conferences in Vegas was when I first met your partner at Mad Rose.
RJ. Yep.
RJ. Yep. Yeah. And I thought, wow, what a cool match he was. Like, he's just so like he's so, I remember he was behind the camera. I don't know. I was like, what a cool energy that guy has.
Yeah, RJ's fantastic. He came to me. I actually helped RJ get sober.
Okay.
My story is that the judge had taken me all the way down to 1 hour a week with one of my daughters, Ruby, who was 5 at the time. She's a freshman at USC, and I had done all the work to right that relationship, and she actually lived with me for the last 5 years before she went off to college. So it's really kind of a Cinderella turnaround recovery story. And RJ watched that. He's also a dad, and that's where we connected. And he opened up a sober living here in Los Angeles, and he had been working 7 days a week for months. And I was going to do a trade show for the Hangs in Scottsdale. And I asked him, do you want to come? I got a hotel room. It's one of those places in Scottsdale where everything's a suite. So like he had a room and I had a room. I got this big suite if you want to come. And so he came, and then on the way back, he pitched me Mad Rose. And I was like, and he had it all worked out. And it was like a 6-hour pitch. And I remember thinking, he couldn't have just made that up on the spot. There's no sharp guy, comes from an entrepreneurial family, very like business strategy. You met him. I mean, RJ's wild. I said, but he obviously has been thinking about this. And I said, so how long have you been thinking about this? He said, well, about 6 months. I said, okay. And he had this vision for a full service digital marketing firm. And I said, RJ, I'm a buyer of everything you're selling. The problem is I don't know anything about any of that. I'm a video guy. And he said, well, you're going to learn. And so, that was another one of those things where you couldn't have really planned that. And then what he said to me is, I'm going to keep things stable emotionally and financially while you figure this out over the first couple of years. And obviously I dramatically underestimated what it would take to figure everything out. So I just went to work and took everything I knew about.
Would you share a little bit about when you say you underestimated? What do you mean
just
when you say that?
I went from being, you talked about it. I generally was somebody who had a visceral, intuitive understanding of the suffering that parents and patients were going through.
Okay.
I understood the suffering that the practitioners were going through because they weren't expressing themselves fully as healers and doctors. And I knew how to make video. And I'd built a few websites, but I didn't really have a holistic understanding of marketing and what thought leadership really meant, what brand clarity really meant, what a small boutique practice needed to do to position itself against traditional dental kind of, insurance reimbursed, compete on price, efficiency model. I didn't know any of that. And so it was a two-legged stool. One is, why am I doing this? I know this other thing so well. And then I kept learning things I didn't know. So it was a very tumultuous couple of years just from an ego perspective, because I had gotten, to your point back then, if you wanted to tell a video story in the Airway space back then, I was the person you called. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really much of an accomplishment. There was nobody else doing it, but still, I mean, I was the guy, right? And then now, I had clients asking me, well, how are we going to market the practice? And when am I going to get my ROI? So I had to quadruple down on humility and starting to understand, what do we need to do to attract these patients that are generally outside of the insurance reimbursement model?
Yeah, tell me about it.
We'll allocate resources toward this. How do we educate them? How do we attract them? Once we get them, how do we keep them? How do we get them referring? It was a big, heavy learning lift in those first few years. So
I'm sure we're going to get some docs that are going to follow this and listen to it, because we're talking things that they're all thinking, that's for sure. And if you figured out the sauce, they all need to call you ASAP.
Well,
because
it's interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but and then the second part of that is the sauce on the brand side. There's a lot of, I don't have an answer to that question. When you decide to promote your practice through brand, i.e., we are the whole health airway practice in this community, and there isn't any direct response data out there to support what a timeline and an exact ROI would be on a traditional direct response campaign. Now, I'm coming at you saying this, I've never seen this fail. I've worked for about 200 people. Everybody who's stuck with it, they get there. I cannot tell you how long it's going to take. If that's a deal breaker, then call me if you need anything. I'll share stuff with you, but I can't go to work for you.
Yeah.
You're going to have to stick with it until you get there. So,
because that's a big conversation, and that's one that we've had a lot of people.
And an easy one for me to have. They're paying every month.
Yeah, of course.
That's a big leap of faith. And so what we've done is we've created something of a community where I said, talk to some of the other people that we've done this with, and you're building a brand yourself. If you stick with it long enough and stay consistent, your intentions are right, and you have an audience identified, you will grow. It's not magic. The doubt is in how long it's going to take and how quickly we're going to course correct when we make mistakes or don't get it right along the way. And that's
the one thing we've done to meet you on that brand side, and you and I actually even haven't in a lot of years talked. There's two offices right now. I've done really well with being able to help docs find internal support, find internally, where within 18 months, I can get them making some, fair enough cash. So they're covering the cost. They're not bleeding it out. Right. So at least that they've balanced out as they're building out their next course, or, working harder with them now about, let's put a legitimate 5-year plan together, and let's talk about how much you spend out on CE, how much time away from the practice, all of these different aspects. And there's this quote or conversation that I end up with every one of them. I'm like, how comfortable are you getting uncomfortable? And let me tell you something, you're not opening another dental office. You are now becoming an entrepreneur, and this is a startup, and a startup has no guarantees, and it's super walking around with half your pants hanging off your butt. And, and especially if you have a spouse, more money's going out the door than coming in the door. And just to what you just said, and that's just the way it's going to flow. So you good with this? Would you like to sign on the line?
And it's gotten a lot better. I mean, a lot of, when we first started 10 years ago at Madrose, or that was conceived about 10 years ago, we started 8 and change. There would literally, somebody would say, what are you going to do for SEO? And my response would be nothing. There are no search terms that validate, that justify any investment in SEO at all. How are you going to create traffic? Great question. It's an entirely different world today. We've got plenty of data on SEO search terms around palatal expansion, around adult orthodontic, all kinds of. MARPI has really just moved the needle.
MARPI's blown up right now. Yes.
But that creates another set of problems where, it's still, at the end of the day, to your point, comes back to who are you and what do you believe in? Because now we can blow you up with MARPI traffic. So my question to you is, are you prepared to treat inside of your competency with MARPI?
Yes.
Right? Because that device in the wrong hands, in the wrong patient, can do more harm than it does good. And that's true with any of them. So it constantly is that conversation around, are we growing in the right direction for the right reasons? And our tools have gotten much more robust than they were 10 years ago. And it is much easier to send traffic than it was before. But, as you know, traffic to a website and phone calls, that doesn't mean you can convert all of them.
No.
That can create chaos if you're not ready operationally.
If you're not,
if your internal marketing is not working, then your external marketing is never going to pay off. What I try to remember myself, and I try to remind my clients, is it really is about the journey. And yes, we do need measurements. Growth is the natural human desire. Money matters a lot, but really it's about what's the next step in front of us here. Who are you? Why are you wired the way you're wired? How are you doing things differently? And what exactly can you offer that person who's desperately in need of your help? And if we stick to that and use tried and true methods and allow the data that we do have to guide us, we're going to get to a really good place. And generally, to your point, within 18 months, you're going to start to see that.
Yeah, 18, 24 months. If you're consistent and you stay, and again, and systems are only as good as the people running them. That's always the other thing too. It's like, there's a lot of leaders out there that, I say, if you want to treat Airway like your mistress, you're going to get mistress results. I mean, you know what I mean? You got to be able to truly be able to commit to a relationship, into changing your philosophy, into the whole thing, which goes into a conversation that I get asked a lot now. And I think all of us, is like this whole personal brand. And I think sobriety, as you're growing, all of those things, we are all a personal brand, right? We all are our own personal brand.
Sure.
It's just more trendy now to market it, I feel like, right? And I'm curious what you guys, what your take is on all of that.
A lot of we do a lot of discovery calls, as you do, and meet dentists and doctors, and I need to be on social media. Well, why? Because Instagram told you that. I have plenty of offices that don't do any social media at all. They're doing very well. So yes, it's trendy to have a personal brand. And then there's the reality of it. Like, I'm about to go on a podcast with Melissa, who's got a great audience. And one more time, I'm going to go, hi, I was homeless at 44. Want to hire me? It's not easy sometimes to be authentic about who you are and stick to your guns about your why. And for me, that, my sobriety experience is a big part of why I am who I am. I believe that transformation is possible for anyone in any business. And I'll give 110% to seeing that transformation happen, if you will, as well. And I can't do that if I don't tell you my why. My why is because I had a life-changing, extremely dramatic, transformative experience myself that completely redirected my life. And I see that parallel to your point. I wrote a blog post about Airway as an add-on. It just creates more chaos. Airway has to be foundational in your practice, at least from an awareness perspective, because the airway health or disease of all of your patients is either contributing to the health or the disease of all of the other body parts, i.e. teeth, gums, and bone, that you're treating now. And so if you just kind of set that off to the side, that doesn't make any sense. So you're either going to accept that it's foundational and it's part of what I do now and start to go on that journey, to your point, or you're going to treat it like a mistress and you're going to get all the chaos that comes along with that. So, it's an interesting.
So it's all right. It's the personal brand, the buzzwords, all of those things. I mean, it can be part, if you are the leader that wants to be in the camera, wants to put the time in and tell that story, because it is factual. I mean, if I do a lecture, I get on stage, I do have to start with those first couple photos of me as a kid and how I got here, because that's what tees up the story. That's the brand, right? It's Melissa isn't just telling you how to do it. I've lived it. I've walked it, right? I've been the patient. I've been the clinician. And so it kind of evolves on its own. And I think we all have these deeper levels of stories. And I do feel as though the docs that get into, I guess I want to talk this. What do you think separates people from being the ones that we've known a lot of people that have come in and dabbled or dipped their toe and then they haven't stayed. They are interested, they see it, and then they don't come back or they don't leave. And it brings me back to a big thing of this industry, and I think a lot of industries, I don't care where you're at, this would relate to anything, is that it's about humans, and humans have behaviors, and behaviors are connected to everything, to all kinds of things. And behavioral change is not something you can usually convince, you have to inspire, right? Or something along those lines. I'm just, what's your thought on behavioral change? And when I say that,
I think behavioral change comes back to purpose and calling. I can do it for a while with willpower, but it's not going to be sustainable. And that, to your point, your purpose and calling is you love doing what you're doing right now. You love it. You absolutely love it. So it's going to be sustainable. And what I talk to the dentist about is that if getting in front of a camera is not part of your purpose and calling, it's going to be very challenging for you to sustain that way. So we need to find out where your purpose and calling is, and then amplify and tell the truth about that, because that is the sustainable part of you that eventually is going to resonate, and you will find your audience. Gary Vaynerchuk, his book is up here behind me, who loves being in front of a camera, talks about
my
writer.
Jersey boy.
He's awesome. I'm a writer. We get 50% of our business from my blog posts that are like 2,000 words long, and everybody says, "Oh, nobody reads those." Well, some people actually do read them. I love to write. Some people love to read. So, and we've been doing that for 4 years, and they're very effective. So it really comes down to what are you willing to stick with. Now, because I'm a writer, that doesn't mean I say no when somebody asks me to come in front of a camera. That just means that's my spot that I know I can go back to over and over and over again. And some clinicians are very process oriented. Their process is completely buttoned up. Others are great spokespeople for the cause. Maggie Graham and Liz Turner doing amazing stuff for the Airway spot. There's you getting to the humanity of what's going on. There's Zarush and the folks at Breathe who are giving us data that we never had before. So everybody has their spot. And that really, to your point of humans and behavior change, the behavior change that I think is the most predictable for the long term is if you just tell me the truth about the stuff that you love, we'll find something that is very sustainable that you can do from a marketing perspective that will eventually get you the ROI that you're looking for. But you got to be honest. And I need to do social media is not a good reason to post on Instagram and TikTok if you hate being in front of an iPhone. It's not going to work. We got to find something else. So
something else that's in it. Yeah, and each of those people you talk about, I mean, Maggie, I think we both can talk about, we both have, worked with them and stuff. Talk about people putting in the work. You know what I mean? I mean, that her and Liz,
Tireless.
Coming in together was, I mean, what a brilliant move for them to team together. I mean, they both brought, I actually had them on the podcast and I said they are better together. They are peanut butter and jelly. They make each other, they're great on their own, but man, when they come together, they can make magic. But that took a lot of trial, a lot of things people don't know to build that brand. And listen, I say Untethered is that whole visual cue, that storytelling, that's a lot of Maggie. Maggie's a fun, artistic kind of person. She's got her own eye on stuff. So I'm sure that type of a client can be, I mean, we all have our ebbs and flows, but having that little bit of eye can be really helpful. That's an area I struggle with. I struggle with deciding colors and themes. I can't make up my mind. And that's branding has been my biggest issue, because I struggle to identify, I'm afraid, I get nervous. And I feel like a lot of clients, I can talk all day, I know what I want to say, but how do you capture me and make sense of somebody like that?
Sure. Well, and Maggie, it took her a long time to get that brand dialed in. When we did, and I'm going to answer your question, but when we were thinking about the name for Untethered, it was months to get them to Untethered Airway Healthcare Centers. they want tongue ties on there. It's too bold. It's too broad. So the answer to your question is it's a process. And
It's a process.
Meg and I spent a lot of time getting to know each other. There were a lot of missteps. We missed I went up there. We did a ton of interviews. Some of them hit, a lot of them missed. It was, and that's the thing that people don't see behind that brand is how hard she worked to get it not only dialed and then comfortable with it, and then where she could really evangelize from it. That is a process. And we to answer your question, there's just a lot of self-awareness that goes along with that. And on the aesthetic side, us and any other branding agency, we have a bunch of exercises. Do you like how this looks? Do you like how that looks? What about this? What about that? But really at the bottom of it, the brand from a end result, what can you see first 3 seconds, name and logo, that's internal work. That is, the best brands have done the internal work. They just have.
And that's been, I want to stay here for a sec because this is whether they're a myofunctional therapist, they're a mom, whatever they're doing, I get asked this a lot and I'm really open on it. I mean, as I've done my internal work, I've almost made it harder. I get lost. I'll make a decision. And, when we came up with, I've always, my initials have mattered to me, right? For some reason, has mattered. It's come up in multiple ways. Maybe my ego too. I just like my name around. I don't know. I like to see my name or something. But I'll tell a little bit of the origin of the story real quick because I think it might be interesting. So I don't know my biological father. I was adopted by my stepfather when I was 2. My birth given name is Melissa Manella. So my name is Melissa Sue Manella. And that was my birth name. And I wasn't until like 14, 15 I found out later on that was my name. I never had introduced myself as that. I didn't know, never was that because my name was changed when I was 2 to Melissa Bonnerdell. And then I got married and I got married to a Mugno. And now my name is Melissa Sue Mugno. So my initials, my married initials went back to my birth initials. And my father-in-law, who I've never met, who passed when my husband was in college, his initials, he's Michael Samuel Mugno, MSM. So I'm MSM. And it's interesting. I have been told I have a lot of characteristics of him. And through my journeys, he's come to me. Well, right now, Inc., it is truly a family business. My sister-in-law, my husband's sister, who has been this bigwig in New York City in fashion and knows operations like no other, has joined 2 years ago, which has really helped us bring operations to another level. My husband now does a lot of our CFO stuff. And the matter, right? Because it's like this Mugno, means something. And I always knew it. And so I kept going around. And long story short, we went back on the brand and I knew the mouth was important. And so it's changed 1,000 times. And it was like, mind your mouth made sense for everything. And the question was, do I change the entire brand to mind your mouth? Because it's everything for me is between the mind and the mouth. And it's this full body connection. And then do I just leave it at it? But, you get into these rabbit holes with different branding companies and agencies. And you're like, 18 months into a hole and a lot of money because they're putting time and effort in. And I want to share this with people because it's common, right? And a lot of people don't think it is or not.
No, it is. And it's more important and less important than we want it to be, right? When I think of you, the one, we haven't had the branding conversation because we haven't talked, but the word medicine the word medicine is missing from your brand to me because you're all about the medicine of the mind, the medicine of the body. You've done ayahuasca. It's medicine, and that's where I'd be pushing you. If we did branding, I'd be like, all right, Melissa, mind your mouth, and don't change your brand. This is just something I do to challenge people's thinking. I'd be like, that reminds me of where you were 10 years ago.
Okay,
when you were just the mouth, but now you're more medicine. So that doesn't mean change the name. That just means how do we start to think around, bringing a more soothing experience to your brand that promotes the concept of medicine as a positive, as a healing, as opposed to this just mouthy person called Melissa.
You're right. Somebody asked me that.
Sorry about that. I don't mean to get you all sideways.
No, listen, this is honestly, this is what all of the people that are hanging out with me want. They love that we go down these rabbit holes. I'm very open. I didn't mean to be defensive or aggressive before. It was That
You've
was how I
evolved.
protected myself. Like,
You've evolved.
because I didn't feel seen in a room. You know what I mean? I used comedian. I was always very authentic. I was always me. I think most people knew that about me. I think they knew that I was genuine. I had these edges. I had these wounds. That's what it was. I had wounds and they were raw. And some people abused them. Some people took advantage of them. And that's facts. And then I also would sometimes acted a little bit like a caged animal. Like I would let it bottle up. And when I finally went and healed myself, and that's what I did, I just healed. I've always been me and I just healed. The goal has been this softer, still me. And it shows how great you really are, is that I started going down the work of medicine. So one of the things I did change in myofunctional therapy was all of our therapy that we do at Faceology is now around sound. Like, so we do kazoo work, humming, and that's because the chanting that I have done on the medicine, we do these ikaros, ishtao, amazoni, bamazoni, like, oosh, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. I started to heal so much of my soft palate dysfunction through the ikaros that I realized the power of the music and that the medicine was in the sound. Actually, that's why I'm really loving the Sonu band right now. I've been working with those guys because it's literally sound bowls on your head.
I used one. It's amazing.
It's amazing. I didn't even know. I just was doing it because I use it for meditation and I use it for health. And so I have like a women's peer group that I work with now for leadership. And I'm like, if you can't get in your body, do some of these chantings and then do some meditation, it will allow you to get into, you'll start to find the rhythm of your breath. And then all of a sudden, when you find the rhythm of your breath, you start to find your essence. And then when you find your essence, you start to find your brand. You'll find who you are, where you're meant to be. And then all of a sudden, like, the joke is then everybody starts crying. And then I'm like, you can send me Venmo
Crying
or
is very
PayPal.
important. Crying is it's an important part of the story arc. You got to get to tears. That's important.
Because it's releasing, right?
Totally. Yeah, 100%.
And I do believe you and I had a conversation at one hotel in Vegas and I cried. Like,
Yeah.
He's like, my work is done. I shall leave.
The tears came next.
Next. Must leave. I think you literally did. I think you literally were like, I gotta go head down to LA. I'll see you later.
It's funny. I used to push for tears in every single interview I did. And then I realized that just because you can get tears doesn't mean you have to get them every time. But it's an important tool
look at that. That's some growth.
Yeah. It's important to help people access that when it's, again, storytelling, when you're helping people tell their story, what I have found is that if I can get completely in service of the other person and completely get myself out of the story itself, that's when the magic happens. To your point of like, I just intuitively, I'd like to see you explore this concept of medicine. And I didn't say much else.
To talk about it.
And then you ran with that, right? And that's the key to, I think, helping people find their personal brand is like, intuitively, here's my hit. Why don't you talk to me a little bit about that? They'll give you everything you want.
Because what I wanted to ask, I thought would be interesting, is purpose and work, right, are hand in hand. So listen, I mean, you obviously have the ability to tap into your intuitive side, right? Like you obviously, I feel like I see it with energy work. I feel like if I'm in the room with the right person, I can feel their energy. I can tap into something. Is that something you're also experiencing as well when you're with certain people? Or do you have your own, obviously your own version of it, whatever it may be?
For sure. I think that a big part of that is just, exercising that muscle over the years of empathy and compassion and respect. And they call it active listening. But for me, nirvana, and this is, you found this too, anybody that's highly ambitious and constantly the mind is racing. And when you can completely get out of yourself and be 100% in service of somebody else, legitimately, all kinds of stuff comes in when you're open like that. And the beauty of it, the aha is like, wow, none of this is about me. So I don't have to be the brilliant branding guy or have all the answers to your advertising. I can just say, this is what I see and feel. Can you please give back to me what happens to you when I say that? And what I have found is that 9 times out of 10, if we go back and watch the recording, you wrote a brand story after I said the word medicine. It's there. And that's the beginning. And now there's a lot of work to do after that. We got to get platforms in place. We got to decide what, but the essence of the brand, you'll find it in the person's truth, and that will bring clarity to their practice brand as well. And, to your, everything else that you're doing, it's going to come from there. If you take that medicine concept, you go back and listen to what you said, it's going to be like, dominoes falling, it'll all fall into place. Because
when something is meant to be, it's actually not that hard.
It's a lot of work, but it's not that hard. Correct.
Yeah. So there's a difference of you have to work. Work is not bad. I mean, putting in the time to do something that flows, that jives, right, is rewarding. Of course, it's time, it's energy, and you're not on the beach, you're not surfing or whatever. You're putting in, but it doesn't feel. I had a fundamental belief growing up, and I don't know, also you being bought, I felt like everything had to be hard. Like,
I still feel that way.
So that's actually one thing I have worked very hard on this last year, was that was actually a core belief that was inside me, that like money doesn't come easy, only certain people make it, like everything's hard, right? Like it's only, and I have done deep meditation work and realized that's not factual. That's a mindset, right? Actually, there's an abundance of money. There's an abundance of time. There's an abundance of a lot. We are quite blessed, but where your mind goes, your energy flows. And ideally, you just have to say, I'm choosing to be here right now. I choose this.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it just kind of releases.
But Melissa, my suffering is so noble, though.
Yeah. See, you like your suffering. Well, you know what? Listen, that was another thing. Is like, I said to somebody the other day, I was like, it's cool to say like, I like this badge of armor. Like this is cool. Like there's no judgment in it. Just own it.
There's a podcaster that lives right not too far from you here in Agora Hills. His name is Rich Roll. He's an ultra marathoner. He's got 30 years of sobriety. I see him in the restaurants every once in a while. And he recently had Malcolm Gladwell on his podcast. He's a successful guy. And he talks about this all the time, and that he's in the business of making things hard and then making that look really good and noble. But there's a cost to that, to what you said. And I know that certainly is, a load that I carry of, Boston school teacher's son, and work hard and suffer and save and sacrifice. And that's all good stuff, but it doesn't need to be as hard as we tend to, and certainly as I tend to make it sometimes.
Which, I did want to touch on this before we wrap, is that, today we got news of a doctor that was pretty known in the Airway space for writing a book. And to be honest, Peter didn't even know. He hadn't even know when we came on. I brought it up to him, and it's called The Dental Diet. And I remember reading it. Really great book, fascinating book, very cool edge. I think I don't quote me. I could have them in the edit, in the transcripts, to make it look what year the book was out. I want to say 2017, 2018. It was kind of a new age of Western price about how importance of nutrition is on chewing and cranial growth, which fundamentally huge, factual truth, very well written, and a very charismatic, young looking dentist. Unfortunately, and I'm not going to, this isn't about judgment or anything. This is just a conversation. It came to light that he had been really struggling with addiction, and he'd been struggling with methamphetamines. And I think I'd love to just chat a little bit. Obviously we don't know him. We don't know his story. We're not talking about him, but it's going to obviously be a conversation that people are going to be talking about in our Airway world, because his addiction has now going to leave a lingering dooms on his legacy, because he ended up going down a rabbit hole of harming others. And, for me, the first thing I think of are his children. I know he has children. I think he was divorced and stuff. So I always feel like, from a child of doing the work, it always sucks when you have to do the work for your parents, because they weren't able to do it for themselves here on earth. But from somebody who's been working in the space with addiction, what do you know about meth? What do you, I know you had mentioned to me you had worked with some addicts that was a drug of choice.
Methamphetamine is a nasty, nasty drug. And it, unfortunately, the story with that doctor is, I'm not going to say it's common, but it certainly isn't the first time I've heard it. And I've known people who have killed others and been killed around methamphetamine addictions. It really just kind of has a darkness and an evil side to it, like none other, in a brutal way. And I think it's a big topic.
Is there any common? So, and I speak of myself, right? So here, I liked Adderall. There's no joke about when they gave it to me because I wanted to be productive. I wanted more hours in the day. That was my truth. I was trying to figure out, and so I was tired all the time. So when I could get something that all of a sudden made me feel like I wasn't tired and I could do all these things. So, if there was a drug of choice, it was, anything that had an upper, I liked a Sudafed, you know what I mean? Because it gave me a little something. I'm not going to lie. I mean, to be very honest and raw about it, because I was this overachiever. I wanted to get things done. I have never touched methamphetamines. And maybe because I knew internally that might be something that would give me that same feeling. I don't know. Could that be a common characteristic? I mean, again, I don't mean to be putting people in buckets here.
No, well, Adderall is a pharmaceutical grade methamphetamine. They have the same chemical base. So, or very similar. So yeah, I mean, when you talk about it, well, who doesn't want to get more done in a given day? That's not a moral issue. That's just people have ambition, want to get more done. And it can start that way. One of the reasons I tend not to cross this line with my clients and doctors, but one of the things that really concerns me about kids going on Adderall is that that's a pretty easy jump if they decide they want to experiment after the prescription ends.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because that is a huge factor. And someone's like, well, it doesn't give that same effect if you don't need it. That's not true. I absolutely needed it. It still made me crave something I couldn't naturally create on my own.
It's, as we're talking about it, meth is an evil drug, but they're all evil. Once the line gets crossed,
yeah,
they all can lead you to a similar place to that doctor that we're talking about now, or an overdose, or just lots of harm can happen. And I think if there's one thing that I try to do in any time that this is brought up is if you're struggling, just ask for help. And that probably is the hardest part. And especially in our community, we've got very high achieving, high earning, highly educated, high status people who don't want to admit, I certainly don't want to admit that there's a problem. But if there is, and if I can certainly help, and you can share my contact information, I'll do anything I can. And at the end of the day, there needs to be a willingness to change. And we talked about that doctor living a double life, where who's presenting himself as one thing and then living another way. And that's very common when addiction takes over. And all you need is one person that you can tell the truth to, and that's where the change can begin. You need to tell one person, I can't stop. And that tends to be the beginning of change.
Well, because it does require, I remember, listen, when you get into, dental celebrities or that little bit of high or whatever, we all get it. I mean, listen, there's a high getting on stage. I'm not going to lie. When I get on stage and I can talk in front of a room, I love it. It's an adrenaline rush. It feels great, especially if I'm also speaking what I like. And I can kind of remember when I want to say it was AAPMD in Fort Lauderdale, right before the pandemic, get on stage. It was the first time my mother had ever seen me speak because she lived in Boynton. She came and first time I presented on my childhood, who I was, showed my own Airway. And in a way, did I come out and say that, that I was using prescription or drinking a bottle of wine to go to sleep to come off of the 40 to 60 milligrams of Adderall I was taking each day to function? No, but I was saying, here's who I am. That was my coming out party in a way. I was like, I'm struggling here. And I remember who it was. It was somebody that goes, I'll never forget, in the front row, they go, oh, well, that explains a lot. I was like, oh, thanks a lot. But it does take that moment of being vulnerable. And I guess maybe that was something I did take for granted. I kind of was always okay just kind of hanging, just putting it all out on the table. And I think a lot of people that is really difficult for them to do.
Of course it is. Of course. And a lot of your audience is doctors. They have license issues. They've got insurance issues. It's a dicey subject. If they ask for help before it goes too far down the road, they don't need to worry about any of that stuff. If there's that little voice in the back of anyone's head who's listening that this has gotten the best of me, just ask for some help. Just ask for some help. It can be turned around. And it's progressive. My experience with addiction is it's progressive. Once, if a chemical has got the best of you, you're doing the best today that you'll ever do until you get help. It's just going to keep getting a little bit worse as the day goes on. And that's what happened with our doctor friend down in Australia. He didn't wake up one day hoping that yesterday was going to happen. That was one small step at a time. One little why and another little why. And the next thing you're inside of this life that you can't control, and then some really bad things happen.
And you get further and further away from, because, I sat down for a sec and there was a moment I was like, I started questioning then, I wonder if he even wrote the first book. Like now I'm questioning all kinds of things, right? And it's interesting. And I want to take back is that great people can fall down dark holes. Great people have beautiful lights and then get lost. And most of it's all interwound up into these little thoughts and voices of insecurity, thinking that you belong in the room, imposter syndrome, faking it till you make it, caring a lot about what other people think. And me and Peter, I think we both want to say to you, we both are victims of caring a lot. I want you all to like me. Peter, I want you to like me. I want to be invited to the table.
Right. Of course. We all do. And it's my biggest concern when I bring a new client on board is I'm going to let this person down and they're not going to like me. It can be paralyzing sometimes. But medicating it isn't the answer. And I think that's a lot of your message and the medicine that you're giving is medicating. It's not the answer. There's because I really do try to bring a Polly Pocket, like a Sally Sunshine now, because I really feel that inside. When I get lost, I get down that dark side. I constantly say to myself, Melissa, where your mind goes, your energy flows. And I'm going to choose on positivity today. And I mean that. And it's possible for anybody. And like Peter said, if you are struggling or anybody that is struggling or you're anything, please, we're going to put both of our infos in the contact information of this podcast. We're here. We want to talk. We'll build. There's a community and it's safe and it's sacred. And wherever you choose to go, whatever route feels, we want you here on earth. We want you to live a healthy, productive, full of abundant lifestyle. And it's possible. It might take work. Absolutely. As Peter said, it might take some work. You got to put some elbow grease in. But it's really rewarding because to truly come, and I thought it was interesting, I pulled it out. We both have these beautiful butterflies behind us. And I thought to myself, my very first tattoo was a butterfly. I have it on my foot. Okay. And it was a butterfly coming out of the chrysalis phase, right? Because for the longest time, I always just felt like I was stuck. Like I had one wing out and everything else was stuck in a blob of a mess. It's funny. I saw that at Cost Plus World Market. And I'm not a butterfly guy, but it really called to me. Like I need that for some reason. And I realized that that's been my experience in all of my clients. Every single one of them goes through that metamorphosis as they move more in the airway direction. They all sprout wings. So it's a great metaphor.
Well, I could talk to you for hours and we could go on. And I hope to have you back on for many times because the guests, there's going to be more things for us to talk about. But I always try to leave the podcast with, some real tangible things for people to take away with. So if people are this entrepreneurial movement, if they're in the airway space or whatever, even if they're just trying to build their own, start a new brand or something, what is some of the first, if you had to give them 3 steps to take, where to go, how to get started, what would you give if we had a couple people sitting in front of us?
For sure. I'll read this book, Start With Why by Simon.
Start with the Why with Simon Sinek.
He talks about why, how, what, and, why is your purpose? That defines your thought leadership. How is, the clarity of your brand, those, 6 or 7 principles that you live by, and then finally what it is that you're doing. And get some help articulating that in some form of kind of a brand paper or creative strategy so that you really understand who you are and how your business is reflecting your true beliefs so that you can connect with an audience. That's step number one. And step number two, who do you want to serve? Who do you want to serve? And that should come out of that should come out of that work. And for me, I want to serve people who are moving down the Airway road because from the very core of my being, I know how transformative it can be for patients. So those are the doctors I want. And then third, either get internal resources that can have you consistently getting that message out so that you're flexing that muscle and you're getting good at messaging Airway and your practice and your thought leadership, or find a partner that can help you with that. So those three things is number one, read the book, do the exercise. Who are you? What does your brand represent? And then, number two, then either get resources or partners and get consistent and just get on the road and just get started.
As you're saying that, I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know about you guys, but I think Emma Mink and Mad Rose need to start doing some stuff together. I think we need to
totally agree.
I'm like, how
we got to get medicine in there. We got to get medicine in there.
Yeah, how
there's beautiful butterflies down in the Amazon when you're doing medicine. So maybe there's some butterfly stuff.
I'm heading in June. Actually, my mom is coming to drink with me in June. Like, wow, right? And so, I think there needs to be a collab. We leave everything with one thing, as we just say, what does mind your mouth mean to you? Like, what does it resonate? What does it mean? And when you think about it,
I think of your transformation. That's what the text I sent, I just was like, wow, this is just so amazing. I've got a before and after shot on this beautiful human that has undergone such a transformation. So whenever I see it or you, I'm like, God, she's doing well. I'm just so happy for you. That's it. It's like, that's it. When I see that, it gives me hope. I know you're giving other people hope. You're doing good work in the world. And I'm just like, that's awesome. Because we're in media, we meet a lot of people whose motives aren't good.
Yeah,
and they're doing really well. And, that's talk about inner work. You got to do a lot of inner work on that. But, when I see somebody like you who was where you were, like I was, where you are now, and have decided to turn that.
I wasn't homeless.
People.
I wasn't homeless.
Sure you weren't. I did that.
I had kids. I was faking it pretty well.
I had kids too and was still homeless. So high class homeless, couches, vans, hotels. But
high class homeless.
What I see is hope. It tells me that there's hope in the world because you've taken those experiences and you've turned them for good in service of other people. And you talked about, mission and purpose and all those other things. My mission in life is super simple. It's to stay sober, serve well, and provide. Provide spiritual comfort, emotional comfort. I provide financially for a lot of people. And that's it. That's my mission. And when I see other people doing similar things like that, it elevates me and warms my heart. So that's what I think of when I think of mission.
Well, I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for coming on the pod today. We appreciate it. This was really amazing conversation.
Yeah, let's not wait years to talk again, right?
Yeah, no, awesome. Absolutely. No, without a doubt. We will not be waiting.
We will not.
I cannot thank you enough. Thank you again for tuning in. This was Mind Your Mouth.